Welcome to Artsy AF.
Yes, welcome to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast, episode 101. Thank you for being here. This week, my guest is the world-renowned visionary artist, Amanda Sage. We talk about the symbols in Amanda's artwork, most notably the train and the egg, how every artist needs a meme of their own. Meme meaning the smallest unit of an idea, not just a silly picture with words on the internet. Although, I believe every artist could use a meme like that as well. We talk about obstacles and resistance along the path of being an artist, talk a little bit about the energy of live painting, Amanda's process, and Amanda gets into her backstory a little bit along the way. If you don't know Amanda, where have you been? Go check her out on Instagram at AmandaSageArt and at AmandaSage.com. One thing I forgot to mention was the Vision Train. She started during the early days of quarantine. It's a 24-hour global art jam. Very cool stuff that you should check out as well. And a few announcements this week. We've got three new Patreon subscribers. If you would like to support this podcast, head over to patreon.com/artsyaf podcast, where you'll find out more about how to do that. And this week, my newest subscribers are, first is Julie Young. Julie is making paintings and murals out there in Hawaii. You can find her on Instagram at Art by Julie Young. The second one is Casey Henderson is making hula hoops on her Instagram. Go check it out. Find Casey at jzcones, jc.cones on Instagram. I will put all these links in the description. And the third is Alcione G. You can find him at Visionary Alcione, also making paintings. Good people should connect with good people. And if you listen to this podcast, that means, well, you've made it. You're a good person. Oh, just kidding. I mean, I think you probably are, but that doesn't automatically make you a good person. But I'm not going to ramble into the mic about all that. We're going to get right into this episode. Thank you guys so much for your support this week. Again, go connect with your fellow listeners, and let's get right into this conversation with Amanda Sage. Amanda Sage. How's it going?
Choo-choo!
Is that should be your catchphrase if it's not like already for the Vision Train, right?
Choo-choo! Yeah, it's just like an automatic reflex that kind of comes up. It's definitely, I think a lot of people are on board these days with that, and I am consistently, so it could be it's a catchphrase.
I love it.
I think more and more people know what that means. Like,
Yeah.
What does that mean? Oh, the train's coming. It could mean a lot of things.
Yeah. I think more visionary artists need little catchphrases like that.
Yeah. Well, it's natural. It's, I think, like style too. In general, it's just something, if you continue focusing on a subject, on something, you're gonna like develop a rap, a rhyme,
Yeah.
a sound, a slogan, something that people also associate with you, and that is a meme, basically, that continues to travel.
Yeah. And yours is for sure the Vision Train.
That's been a pretty major meme for the past decade for me.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that I knew when I first started to see it, that it would be something that I would be on for the rest of my known life, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that and the egg are definitely what I associate with you the most in terms of like symbolism. So this is one of the questions I had in mind. I wanted to ask you about the egg. Does that egg ever hatch, or is it always just like the seed?
Well, it's interesting. that you bring the egg in right now, because it's like, what came first? Was it the chicken or the egg? You know? And the fact that we talked about the train before the egg fits right in
Yeah.
with that subject, because really, well, kind of the way I've been seeing the story is that the train came out of the egg.
Yeah.
So yes, it has hatched, but for many years, people asked me this question as I started painting the eggs, right?
Yeah.
And I kept asking that question, I think, even in the first year that I started painting them or saw these portals, like, and that I was going to paint portals also for the rest of my life, you know, and it was the egg that gave me this kind of like container to feel safe in, and safe to explore what wanted to come through me. And that was really kind of the prayer that revealed it to me. I was looking for something, for a container that I could explore in and feel safe, to let come through me what wanted to come through. So it was like a container for a prayer that wasn't like a specific thing. It was a quest, right? Like, what is my contribution? What can I contribute to humanity through this medium of a canvas, which is a portal?
Right. That's interesting. So the egg came before the choo-choo.
But you know, gosh, I don't know, because I mean, when I go back in like the line of my life in terms of influence of this incarnation, right, is like the train is woven all the way through.
Yeah.
And like, I grew up listening to Cat Stevens' Tea for the Tiller Cat little cassette tape in my dad's car, or like The Peace Train is a song that is on there that is celebrating also, this is the 50th year anniversary of when that was published, when that was released.
Nice.
And so, and I'm not 50 not yet, but it was like a really common theme, and like the train was woven, that quest of like, what role do I have to play, has been like in the meme sphere around me because of my parents and also the community that I grew up in.
Yeah.
You know, since I was a kid, it just then was given a container for me, like an association. I didn't see the train in the way that I kind of see it now, until I had a certain like constellation of experiences and connections with people that I had experienced myself, that I hadn't read, that I hadn't heard about.
Right.
You know, and then I was like, oh, this is something that's coming still, and it's going to happen in our lifetime. It's one of the best ideas I've heard about, that I've heard of. And I'm interested in seeing that come to fruition. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Because I want to go. I want to be there. It's going to be a super historic moment, and not just a moment. It's
like an unfolding.
It's a whole unfolding of moments. It's a meta thing, right? And we're already on it too.
Yeah.
So it's like a puzzle matrix, future, past field of a vision that keeps my attention.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure. So something you just said there about kind of that the meme of the train sort of being within your sphere, but it didn't really like crystallize until you had gone through, you know, X, Y, and Z experiences and had met people and listened to people. That seems to be like a recurring theme of artists' paths, I think. It's like we kind of don't know what we're doing. We just know that we enjoy this thing. And then all of a sudden, after so many hours of, you know, listening to Terrence McKenna or whoever, it sort of like crystallizes for us. And I don't know, that just strikes me as interesting. Are there any people or events or situations that stick out for you on that path that were sort of like breadcrumbs to the place that you're at now?
Yeah, there's a whole list of them.
Mm-hmm.
And just you saying that inspires me further to document it, which it is in some ways. But, the people, the influences, the characters, the situations. Burning Man was a really big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
That was where I kind of like landed in a place that I knew I had heard about, right? But was so much more than I had heard about.
Yeah.
It was a place of like meeting that was kind of like off the books in a way, and full, like, full privilege in a sense to express,
mm-hmm.
right? That was outside of the walls of the world that had been built before us, so a real
Right.
container of exploration and thought leaders. And I think I met Charles Eisenstein there for the first time. I'm not sure if I met Rick Doblin there as well for the first time, but there are characters like this that I found myself on panels with, or in conversation at Burning Man, facilitated conversation that was really exploratory and inspiring.
Yeah.
And Martina Hoffman and Robert Venosa, many artists that have been a big part of the visionary art movement, and writers, and like characters that are really have been influential in doing major things,
Right.
and have been inspiring to the younger generations.
Yeah.
And it was also Jim Shannon I met. He was the general of the New Earth Army.
Okay.
And there was a Hollywood movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Oh yeah.
That
yeah.
maybe you've seen, and Jeff Bridges plays Jim Shannon.
Okay.
And it's a lot. It says right in the beginning of the movie, more of this is true than you would think, something like that.
Yeah.
And I met him in 2011, I think. I heard him live. I was listening to Coast AM.
Nice.
And it was like he was a guest on there, and I was listening live, which I like to do because I love tuning into like the field of live radio waves. I guess there's millions of people that tune into that every night for many years.
Yeah.
And so he was a guest on there, and he was talking about being on the big island of Hawaii and all this stuff. And I was painting Pele, preparing to go for the Visionary Arts Congress, the second one that was put together by Rio Gordon, and like brought together such like an epic crew of artists and performers. And it was like a conference, and I was listening to the radio. I hear about Jim Shannon, and I just feel this impulse. I'd never called into Coast AM before. And I mean, it's scary, right? And you usually don't get through too. People come get on, and they're like, I've been trying to get through for 6 years.
Yeah.
And, and so, but they don't even screen me, and they put me straight through onto the air. And I got to share about the conference and talk about visionary art and the movement that I saw, that Jim should be there, as an artist and a visionary like leader. We would love to invite him. And I think he said on the air, he said, the visionary artists are painting the signposts for the future. And I was like, slam, right?
Yeah,
Slam dunk. And we met him. And then I realized that he became my uncle. He was my uncle. He was my adopted uncle, but distant relatives, actually, through genealogy, also uncle.
For real?
For real.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee. We both have Robert E. Lee in our bloodline.
Got
way
it.
back.
Yeah.
But so, as an earth kind of like warrior, visionary, somebody that was like really looking to transform the way that we interact, and becoming like these like light Jedis of potential of healing, you know, like he really inspired me, you know. It was through him that, and others, you know, many other scenarios, that I was like, all right, this is something that, you know, I find so interesting, and what can I do to contribute to it? I guess I can paint about it. I can explore through talking about it, and through building this story as something that is, I see you and what you're doing, and you're definitely on the train too. I don't know how you see it. Like, you might see a little bit of a different picture, but it's, you know, we're seeing the same movie. Shout out to Stephen Brooks. He's also another reason why I've seen the movie. You know, that's one thing that he says. Stephen Brooks is a permaculture and community builder.
He's the part of Envision, right? Or
yeah, he helped found Envision.
Okay.
And Punta Mona.
Yeah.
In Costa Rica.
Got it.
And Alegria and Ecovia. He's super into building community. You know, eco villages and centers where we can gather, you know, and we learn from each other. Because I mean, this is ultimately what it's about. The train is ultimately a sower of seeds of the genius of humanity, you know, to go back on the tracks that took us to the end of the Western frontier on a journey. You know, we go back on a journey of reconciliation, remembrance, regeneration, and leave a seed of awesome, leave a trace of awesome, you know, in collaboration, in like true questioning, investigation. What is needed here and now? How can I be of service?
Yeah. You know? Yeah. Well, that was a very thorough answer. I don't even know what my question was, really. We were just talking about the train. I'm trying to make sure that I'm on track. And yeah, I do think that I'm on the train. I think that, like, if you're being creative in the world and you have good intentions and good actions, then you're on the train. Because you could be doing literally anything else with your time. You know, you could be, I mean, and I'm guilty of this a lot. Like, you could be distracted on your phone, just sort of consuming, you know, consuming whatever it is that's being pointed your way. Or you could be, you know, you could just be, I don't know, even if you're doing small little creative things, I think it's important to cultivate that all the time, you know? And that's part of what this podcast is about, I think. Like I was saying, like, start doing something because it feels good and you like it, but then it turns into this actual purpose behind it. And I think part of the purpose is to low-key convince anyone listening that they are actually an artist as well, or that they are a creative person, and that'll bring just so much enrichment to your life, and you can enrich the lives of other people if you think creatively. You don't necessarily have to be like, I'm a painter or I'm a this. You don't have to completely identify with it. You don't have to tell a story necessarily, but just as long as you're paying attention, you know, there's a lot of awareness that goes into creating a piece of art. And that's kind of what I want to put out there, in no uncertain terms, because with painting, you know, people they can look at it, but they sort of make up their own story. Do you know what I mean? But having words, it's sort of like, well, you can't really misinterpret what I just said. I'm sure you could, but anyway, now I'm rambling. Yes, so I wanted to talk about your childhood and like your upbringing. And it's been a while since we've talked, but if I remember correctly, you had a pretty unique upbringing compared to most of like modern American society. Did you ever feel like a weird kid when you were growing up?
That's a great question. Yeah, for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
did feel like a weird kid at times, but I also, yeah. And I think when that moment happened, it kind of crumbled something in me.
Mm.
Something got dimmed, I think.
Really?
And that was like a kind of freedom that had been facilitated for me in my younger kind of like childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like when I went into school and we went through a big move when I was 9 years old.
Mm.
And that kind of like shifted a lot for me. And but I eventually found my way back.
Yeah.
But I was lucky to be homeschooled for some of my childhood, and had like a really nurturing kind of media free environment to play and be creative. And yeah, I think there's a lot of like fun and freedom that I had, rather than being kind of confronted with or pressured, I guess, into things that were, I don't know, distracting maybe from me kind of like create my own creativity and access to it through play,
Mm-hmm.
like healthy play. I mean,
So it started like you were homeschooled for the first several years.
yes, I was homeschooled. Actually, I did go to a Waldorf kindergarten in South
Mm-hmm.
Florida. And then also I was born in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
But we lived in South Florida then, like a year after I was born, until I was 9. And I went to a Waldorf kindergarten there, and then also we moved to Pennsylvania when I was in first grade and went to the Kimberton Waldorf School for
Okay.
first grade. Then I was homeschooled for 2 years in Florida, and then we moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that's where I did the rest of my schooling, in the Waldorf School, Shiny Mountain Waldorf School in Boulder. And I did go to Germany when I was 15 as, I think, one of the first American exchange students at the first Waldorf School
Oh
in
wow.
Stuttgart, Germany. And I got to live there and be there for 7 months, which was a really incredible experience. It was the biggest school I'd ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
And all anthroposophical architecture, and like a really kind of fascinating experience.
Yeah.
So Waldorf schools were like my major like foundation in terms of like schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't go to university after either, although I was accepted into the Pratt Institute and also the Chicago Art Institute.
Oh, nice.
Which both were very interesting to me, and I went and visited.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up on a totally different path,
Right.
off of there. But
good for you on not actually going to college, as someone who went to college. And yeah, now I still have a little bit of debt that I'm paying off. I have that really useful degree in psychology that's really not doing much for me. I guess, that's kind of my own fault. But I wanted to sort of clarify what the Waldorf School is, and talk maybe a bit about the founder, Rudolf Steiner.
mm-hmm.
That is his name, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Waldorf School is an international movement that just celebrated its 100-year anniversary, actually, in 2019. And it was originally created as a school for, I think, the employees of a cigarette factory or some cigar factory in Germany.
Interesting.
And the owner of it was interested or knew Rudolf Steiner, and he commissioned him to create this program. And it's really, Steiner is a mystic and a visionary, and in all kind of like liberal arts realms and science too. I mean, the man is a deep well
Mm-hmm.
of information,
Yeah.
I guess. And in the Waldorf School, like I actually you don't really get presented with a whole lot of his work. It's more his kind of like philosophy around like the spiraling nature of the development of a human being, which is a really beautiful concept. So it's like the children are received, in a very like imaginary, evoking, really the mineral realm and the plant realm and the, it's a really beautiful environment with a lot of song and dance and movement and drawing, a lot of artistic expression.
Nice.
And then you move through a block system that has like a way of like illustrating and integrating a story that is pretty void from what I know of the public school system.
Yeah.
So you make your own textbooks instead of learning or like learning from them.
Yeah.
And like you draw like a table of contents, and your essays are then, before they're written nicely in your book, they're corrected by your teacher, so you're learning, multi-layered learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think like I got really into it was in 7th grade. My teacher was extremely enthusiastic, an amazing human being. And like a real, I think like Dawn Deal, shout out to you, my love.
Yeah.
Like she really like planted seeds in all of us of like real encouragement, that we were capable, and that if we were willing, and if we, we put our focus into it. And it was through her and her passion for the artists of the Renaissance.
Oh, nice.
And it was in 7th grade that she presented, like, all these works to us. And then we had to do copies, we'd choose one of these artists to study. I remember choosing Botticelli and I was so in love with Botticelli, and having the experience to first try and copy like a Leonardo da Vinci drawing. There was something that went like through my body, like an electrical surge. And it wasn't just me. It was a small group of us that were really into it, and you kind of help each other, that kind of group dynamic of competition.
Yeah.
Also really drove us,
right.
To like, well, I spent 6 hours on my drawing, like that was a big deal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's all colored pencils. I didn't actually touch paint until I was like acrylic paint was when I was in high school. And my teacher in high school was a fantastic realist artist, Hikaru Hirata.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know Hikaru.
He came when I was, I think, in 11th grade.
That's so crazy. I mean, it's things like that that just seems like destiny to me. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Hikaru, actually, I just found out that it was like a few months ago or sometime recently that Martina was actually going to take on that position, Martina Hoffman.
Really?
At the Waldorf School.
Yeah.
But then she wasn't able to. She declined and suggested Hikaru, who was friends with Martina and Robert. And the high school was brand new. I was in the first graduating class at the Waldorf School there. And so he, it was an experiment, really. Like we were very involved. Like my class was very involved with the development of the school at the time too. And Hikaru had his studio in the classroom. It was awesome.
Oh, nice.
And so he really like saw something in me, and he saw like an interest and a curiosity, and he really like pushed me gently, to explore my art more. And it was through him that I saw for the first time I saw Ernst Fuchs's work. I saw Robert Venosa's work, Martina's, Muddy Clarvine, all these artists.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, I probably wasn't paying full attention because I was interested in a lot of other things as well at the time. But it was there. I was paying attention. I mean, it wasn't like I saw these artists and was like, oh, I'm going to go seek them out.
Right.
I actually met Phil Jacobson, who was living in Boulder and was working with the Naropa Institute, through another man, Sam Bull, at the time when I was like probably in 12th grade. And I had an interview with Phil, and I was like, you know, that was my gateway actually into going to work with Michael Fuchs.
Okay.
So it's like there is a lot of like little moments and synchronicities along the way that have very much felt like destiny, you know.
Nice. So,
and where I responded, you know, I was like, okay,
right,
this seems like a good way to go. I'll go.
Yeah.
I'll show up.
Yeah. I haven't asked this question in a long time because sometimes it's a dead end, and I think I think it's a pretty fertile topic. Do you believe in free will?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Mm-hmm.
But like, so all those little things like along your path that you had no control over, you know, but
you think about the junctures though, you know, where you were the one that decided to go that way or that way.
That's true. I suppose.
I think.
Yeah.
You know, or where could it come from? It could come from, you know, a deeper, but there's times I think we go in a general direction, right? That is maybe predestined in some way, right? That we are tuned towards,
right.
But along the way, there can be things that can jolt that extremely.
Yeah.
In some way or another. But I think there's out of like the multidimensional reality that we're in, there's like a formula that keeps unfolding that could be considered destiny in many directions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's kind of a paradox. I don't think that like free will, determinism, you know, that's sort of asking someone to choose between science and religion, or you know, Republican or Democrat or whatever. I think it's more like some sort of interplay between like agency that we all definitely have. My problem with it is that the word free to me it implies like completely like forging your destiny, when like to be able to make the decision that fulfills whatever positive thing that might happen, you have to have like you have to have some sort of necessary like experience and knowledge and the ability to call on that knowledge in certain situations. And where does that come from? That comes from other experiences in your life. And I don't know, but now that's getting maybe a little too far down the rabbit hole, but
well, in that we're not totally free, I agree. You know, like, because we identify mostly as these personalities, and through all of the things that have made us to be in the, you know, the consciousness that we are now. So, you know, true freedom happens when we you know, when we go there.
Yeah. When we cross over. Yeah. Do you think, okay, so this just popped into my head. Do you think about that a lot? Like, what do you think death is like? This is like getting kind of weird, but let's see where it goes.
No, it's not weird at all.
Okay, sweet.
Like, it's actually like, I feel like I have, no, it's not a lot of death around me right now in the studio, but it's like, oh, it's a portal. It's another portal, right? I think it's, I have been thinking about it more. My uncle just passed over last week, or maybe a week and a half ago now. And other people, you know, there's been a lot of passing in this past year. And I mean, the older we get, the more people we know, the more people transitioning. And, you know, I don't know. I don't feel afraid of it. I don't feel confused about it. I don't feel like I want it to not happen. I think that it's I think it's a beautiful natural thing. And I think it's something that actually we need to get more connected to, because there's a lot of like powerful energy in the, arrival and departure from this plane,
Mm-hmm.
and being with people and being like open really to exploring that, what that is. I think there's a lot of like society that is trying to keep us disconnected from that. It's like the eternally young kind of like fascination, and like but the time of transition, I mean, it's the greatest mystery, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
as much as I love listening to like near-death experience stories, and I think a lot of people have had incredible revelations, through that, which is one of those key places of that has jolted people into a state of more appreciation of life.
Yeah.
And we should listen to them more. Like, I'm really interested in those kinds of stories. Like, those stories really fuel, I feel like, a lot of my work, is like experiences, tales from the other side.
Yeah.
And you can reach that other side also through other ways.
Right. Right. If it's anything like the DMT flash, it's going to be pretty cool. And what a lot of people don't talk about in that regard to DMT is how it feels. And I always think that it feels just like, for me at least, such a big relief, like a giant weight has been lifted for a little bit. And then, you go back into life, and you're like, you start worrying or thinking about this and that, and you just have the thought, the thoughts kind of come back in. And Ram Dass said, what'd he say? It's like taking off an old shoe or a tight shoe. And so I always try and keep that in mind. And I try not to give in to fear around it. Although I totally understand like why anyone would be afraid of it, because it's like, it's ostensibly the end, but I kind of don't think that it's totally the end, just like I don't know, it's like graduating from high school or something.
I was just about to say graduating.
Nice. Yeah.
And I think in that, like, actually this time of year that we're in right now, we're past the Samhain, we're going towards the winter solstice.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's this, the Day of the Dead was just earlier this week or last week. Mm-hmm. And Halloween, right? And so that time is like really where we're thinking of the ancestors. We're feeling the fecundity, how it's the dissolving of the being, right? And there's something in that psychedelics has given me within like moments, flashes of a smell and a feeling in my body, and a feeling that is this kind of like full, it's like decomposition into something that does kind of like bloom again. It's a constant like blooming and dissolving and blooming and dissolving, you know? And there's a kind of smell to it. I a lot of things I associate a lot with color, but I associate a lot with smell, like memories too. Also like deja vus come to me a lot that way as well. Yeah. And it's a space to pay attention, and there's something about like seeing oneself and seeing one's environment and life and mourning and grieving the losses, and sitting with that and feeling like the brokenness, or all of the, I don't know, ways that you could see that it's where there's sadness, because there
Yeah.
is sadness,
Mm-hmm.
in so much, and then being able to see that, not turn away from it,
Yeah.
and drop into a kind of gratitude, is I don't know, is very, very nourishing.
Yeah. I was gonna say that grief and that sadness and all that emotion is a fertile ground for a lot of things. You say gratitude can like spring up out of that. But I think even like, and you also mentioned this, like, can serve as a reminder to just go full throttle with your own life and do what you want. And you can even use it for fuel if you're creating something. Um, I think that sometimes just those really intense emotions, and they can be negative or positive, but just that whole act of like taking that and feeling it and just feeling those feelings while you're at the easel or while you're making music or writing or speaking or whatever it is that you do, or even cooking dinner, you sort of, it's that old word transmute. You sort of, those emotions can go through a transmutation and you can create something super cool out of it.
I think it's also what if we can channel that energy
Mm-hmm.
into getting us to actually start something. While you're in it, that's one thing. But I think our biggest hurdle is to actually get into it, to
Mm-hmm.
actually pick up that brush and actually make the
Yeah.
mark, to actually put the pen to paper. And I think we all struggle with that threshold, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that like feeling the worthiness, the value, the pulse to actually become active,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you're in that, it's like the biggest trick, um the art, the what is it, the war of art.
Yeah. Stephen Pressfield.
Stephen Pressfield, I mean, that's all he talks about really in there, from many different angles, the resistance,
Mm-hmm.
and how often that appears, and how that is one of the biggest obstacles, for us. It's a tool,
Mm-hmm.
though, too, resistance, right? It is a part of the process.
Yeah.
Like in the first dimension is the prayer, and then comes resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's a law. It's actually a law of within creation.
Right.
And yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my questions was going to I wanted to ask you about like friction or resistance that you've faced, or maybe you still face. It can be something huge, or it can be just like smaller things, but just something like that you faced on the art path, or even in your day to day.
I face it all the time,
Yeah.
from so many different angles and so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to change, like its color and its form, like the way resistance dances, with the way it dances with me. And you know I think it's something that, as as my light, as my work, my field expands,
Mm-hmm.
so does the resistance.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. It's like the
and
knowledge. It's like that knowledge saying, like, the more you know, the more you know that you don't know. Right.
yeah, there's something very real to that. And I think, as my personal experience has been, yeah, fascinating, I guess. It feels very personal to even talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's something that is, um yeah, it's something that I struggle with every day.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the biggest struggles is learning to accept myself, and to love, myself.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think, as more and more as the work and the stories and the and the visions and the the gifts compound and multiply.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like a void that multiplies in some way.
Yeah.
That you have to sit with. And like, I think there's a pressure too, and a fear of not actually being able to really follow through.
Yeah.
And so, and it's like, and the thing is you never stop learning. You never stop having to learn. And if you do, then you really get like in a mess.
Yeah.
And there's that feeling of like building something where the walls are just going to crumble, right? Or the rug's going to get pulled out from underneath you. And I feel this pressure as an artist,
mm-hmm.
like a professional artist, doing this for many years, and being at a point now where I'm kind of like mid-career, I guess, or
mm-hmm.
who knows how long I'll be around, but it's like, it's the pressure of expanding into new, even greater responsibility
mm-hmm.
and organization. And, knowing where your boundaries are and really choosing wisely of where you want to put your energy.
Yeah.
And not letting others hijack your energy because they want to include you. That's been a huge problem or challenge for me, not a problem. I mean, it's like an incredible gift to be blessed with so many connections and connected to so many people and very cool people and projects, but it's like, you can't do everything. And even to do everything that you come up with, then you start
right.
like, I'm classic, like Aries, let's start things.
Yeah.
But learning how to operate and maintain them, create real strong foundations so that they can flourish.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge learning curve for me right now, and I feel like I'm capable, and sometimes I feel like I'm not. Sometimes I fall into the illusion that I don't, like, I'm not, I don't have the skills in that area or that area,
mm-hmm.
where in many ways it's like a talk that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
We define, we put ourselves in a box, so it's like to take the time to step back and to slow down has actually been a real challenge for me. And I'm kind of in the midst of that right now and reflecting to what, like, the past 20 years adventure and the past 10 years of like major touring, kind of like all over the world. And then the past year and a half, 2 years of like major online like investment and like starting a nonstop global art jam 24/7. I mean, that literally created something in my brain where I was like on a space station for most, the first 8 months or many still, know. So it's like, how do we, like, reflecting on that and where am I in the midst of it? That's, I think I kind of lose that thread sometimes, and so you got to find your way back.
Yeah. I'm really reminded of Burning Man in what you just said, because if anybody listening has been to Burning Man, they can definitely testify to this. You'll never see everything there is to see, and you'll never do everything there is to do. And so it's really easy to sort of maybe spread yourself a little thin doing that, because you're literally being, I guess waterboarded isn't the right word out there on the playa, but you're being like dust stormed with opportunities, like it's just this crazy cloud of everything coming at you. And that I know that that's tough for me. And I'm definitely not at the place that you are. I haven't been painting for 20 years and I haven't been touring for 10, and with all these connections that you've made, there must be someone kind of like tugging at your sleeve every day or every couple hours even, maybe. So this might dovetail nicely. What kind of routines do you have? Are you on what's your favorite way to wake up, I guess?
Hmm, that's a nice question. What's your favorite way to wake up? Um, I like to not have to wake up before I feel like fully rested.
Yeah.
Of course, that's nice. I like to drink some lemon water, lemon water,
Warm?
and
Or
yeah,
like room
like a
room
kind of
temp?
like a tea.
Oh, okay. Okay, got you. Okay.
No,
Gotcha.
just like some fresh lemon, squeeze some lemon, and then put a little hot water in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a nice way, like especially in the winter. And then my mom really likes to do celery juice. I
Mm.
kind of dig that too. I'll do that sometimes, celery juice, and then eventually some breakfast. But stretching is always a wonderful way. Doing some yoga, doing a little routine, and I'll go through phases where I'll be more like dedicated to like a morning routine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go through phases of getting up at 6 a.m. and working out with some friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like we do this fitness for freaks like session.
Nice.
And that's pretty bomb. But I have to then go to bed, before midnight to be able to feel like that's going to work for me.
Right.
And I'm sometimes such a night owl, but I do like, I mean, to get the day started in that way feels really good. Also to like get straight into emails and getting some things out of the way right in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
on my list, and then to be able to really dive into the studio in the afternoon. That feels great.
Yeah.
And to do that kind of cycle. But it depends. I've spent so much, my world has been very flexible because of like living in different places and moving around quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also I'm pretty malleable in that way. Like,
Yeah.
so sticking with one routine and like eating a very limited diet or things like that, I'll do something like that every now and then, but it's not a consistent thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely like the same way. To me, it kind of all depends on how passionate I'm feeling about whatever it is that I'm painting that day. And then just situational things that come up, like what needs handled, what needs attention. But I will say that like just taking a little bit of time in the morning, whatever it's for me, it's like, it's some combination of like exercise, yoga, and or meditation that really helps. Just like having this little bubble first thing in the morning to kind of like set your body and your mind on a path of like at least productivity and at least like feeling good. And I think that like maybe our society, or the like America, undervalues kind of like your mood, someone's mood, or someone's feeling, how they feel, And I think that that's actually one of the most important things as to how any particular day or situation is going to turn out.
Totally. Meditation, having those, setting aside time to do that daily whenever you do it, it works fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I'm reminded again. I'm excited for kind of like the winter and to settle into my studio in Colorado and be like in that space again, but it's true. And I've been thinking about it lately. Allison Gray, she has a routine, she practices the piano in the morning.
Nice.
Like every day as well, as meditating, doing the inversion table, writing, and all of these things are super inspiring. And I think if we just try it out for a little bit, and then adopt it and get it into that's what yoga is for me.
Yeah.
In many ways. And that just helps ground me and center me in my body and in my being. And then I feel much more like capable at meeting the day and doing the things that are sometimes like we just want to procrastinate, you know. It's
Right.
like you clear out the pipes.
Totally. Yeah. That's a great
Yeah.
analogy. I love that. Um, so yeah, I wanted to get to, like, in our little metaphorical language journey here. We've covered the routine, and now you're in front of the easel, right? Um, I'm curious, or at least I think my audience might be curious. What is your process like for creating paintings? What is maybe the ratio, or where do you fall on the spectrum between having something planned out or just freestyling something?
Well, it depends kind of on the scenario,
Mm-hmm.
of course.
Mm.
And it like a lot of paintings in the past decade plus, I'd say, including the two behind me,
Mm-hmm.
started as live performance paintings, doing live paintings. And those are often pretty fueled by the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have like a set of like very basic like outlines that I start with, that I have actually, and it can be actually quite complex too.
Mm-hmm.
Not so, and sometimes I do have some drawings and sketches, but they're more so like in my field, like senses. And I kind of see them as little eggs, like little seeds that kind of float around me. They're symbols, they're words, they're colors, they're moods, they're like notes, lots of notes. And they all kind of are like around me, and I don't let them get too close, but I keep them around me,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then when the time comes to start, like I often end up with a blank slate, totally freaked out, feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. And then I'll remember one thing. I'll remember a color, you know, and then it starts with one color, it starts with one brush,
mm-hmm.
and it starts with one spot. And if I feel like it's important to measure, you know, say the middle of the canvas, because a lot of my pieces are kind of centered. Mm-hmm. There's a center point in many of them.
Yeah.
Or any other kind of like things that I feel like I want to measure. And then I'll just go into this. It's almost like a feeling of purging
mm-hmm.
most of the time before I started painting. And then it's like throwing yourself down the water slide. I haven't jumped out of an airplane yet, but you know, jumping off of a cliff, you know, it's like that thing. And then you're like in it, and music is such a fueling motivator. Mm-hmm. Also people around that are just like, you know, watching, and you know, they're in this, they fall into the maze, into the matrix of the thing, you know. And so this exploration is really fun for me. But when I do commissions that are more planned out ahead of time, that's a different story. But a lot of things, I do a lot of responding to what is and what's there. Nice. And then I have tools. I have a bag of tools of how to unpack it and to reveal it, you know. And I have a system, and that system, no matter if I paint for an hour or days or months or years, you know, I follow that system.
Nice. Okay. So you're talking about tools, and so it occurs to me, like, when I look at your work, a lot of it looks like it's sort of like this intuitive kind of flow that you have going on, coupled with just like a very good eye and a very good like feel, and maybe accumulated knowledge of how to create forms and how to make a good composition. And so I don't know exactly how to articulate a question out of that, but maybe you could talk about the importance of study and just learning how to create forms, and just about art in general. because there's kind of like the spectrum between like just pure figure drawing or chiaroscuro oil painting to like worked out festival art that's really fun, but you can't really tell what's going on. And I think you found this nice happy medium. So yeah, if you want to just talk about the importance of like learning.
Importance of learning, foundations, like real base root laws of nature. And that's really what it is. That's all it is. It's not actually that complicated. But it takes a kind of discipline, and it's nice to have a good guide, a good teacher, to help you see, to help you learn to see and to study, the laws of color and light, shadow and form in nature, and I think there was a big break in art history in kind of modern times, where a kind of attention to developing skills of I guess real drawing and painting and kind of left like the fine art realm in many ways and went into illustration, which is awesome. But it's like I think a lot of like painters and I've found have missed out, or missed out in learning real skill sets of drawing. I mean, I think the foundation of drawing what you see is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And learning the architecture and the complexity of form. And you have to, in many ways, like detach yourself from your own interpretation to actually really see the thing. And I think what's been so pushed is like your interpretation. Like we want to see your interpretation. We don't want to see the thing, as it is, because we could just take a photograph of it, right? Or it's like it's antiquated.
Antiquated. Yeah.
And but I think there's a revival of that because there's a necessity or a sense that would be like there's a harmonics there.
Yeah.
There's something about what the old masters figured out and knew that could really help us, in exploring new vistas of the imagination.
Yeah.
And there's a harmonics, a balance, composition. You said it, so I had the privilege to really study with some artists and some, work with this, great visionary mentor, Ernst Fuchs,
right.
For a decade, and I was in my 20s while he was in his 70s. And I got to experience a lot of different projects and scenarios, through his work that helped inform my hand and my eye. His son, Michael Fuchs, was my first real teacher after Hikaru. And he was, he really pointed me towards realism.
Yeah.
And to painting what I saw. And so that gave me the foundation and the confidence through the brush and the mixing of color, and it's muscle memory,
It is, yeah.
And that, and you do more and more and more of that. And then you combine that with, your confidence of being able to choose color and define form. And then you translate that, then you push even further through that to what is it that you actually want to say? Yeah. What is it that, and that's a tricky kind of phase for anyone to be kind of like, well, where am I in this?
Right.
But I think that the foundation is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I think the more I see young artists and anyone take the time to do that, their work becomes more powerful.
I agree.
But it doesn't have to be, though. I
Right.
mean, I
Right.
see
Right.
people that are not, their tendency is not towards drawing what they see. Their tendency is towards, um, you know, reflecting a more abstract and graphic in some ways, like
Mm-hmm.
realms and
Mm-hmm.
realities. And that's something that I am not as, I mean, I have an abstraction in my work.
Mm-hmm.
There is an element of abstraction. But that's not really where I come from.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I come more from kind of like the realist, naturalist, or entry, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
drawing what I see, you know,
Totally.
and that release into the field to the plane of the field, you know, has really been a further doorway for me because of that confidence, I think.
Yeah.
And understanding color and form and
Yeah.
to a degree.
Yeah. I think that like even if you're making abstract work, especially color, light, and shadow, and the basics of form are will just make it seem more real. It's like something, you know, abstract. If abstract art is something that you've never seen before and is purely imaginative, then you can create a more and maybe people don't want to do this now that I'm saying this out loud, but you can create a more believable abstraction if you know all those things, I feel like. But I mean, maybe not either, you know?
Well, I think it's more than that. I think there's a transmission
Mm.
of that can happen through the harmonics of beauty, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is
Yeah, I see what you're
something
saying.
that then if it works, you want to be around it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a portal. If it doesn't work, that can also be intentional, but let it be intentional, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like if it's supposed to make you nauseous
Or
then you're
uncomfortable.
and that
Yeah.
was the intent, or uncomfortable, and that's the intention of the artist, then that's a good thing. But I think a lot of people, you know, a lot of artists don't think that far, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're fueled by also their early in their journey, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're fueled by an idea or a vision, but don't and sometimes they get a little lazy, you know. It's like you see, and I'm talking to you out there, you know, like you see that work
Yeah.
that is sitting on your easel, and you're kind of like, you know, there's parts of it that you feel good about, there's parts that you don't feel so good about, but you kind of like keep ignoring. It's like, oh, the hands look weird, but whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever,
You're like,
you know.
and,
but there's things like, yeah, it's like you gotta, if you keep seeing it, you gotta do something about it.
yeah, yeah. You can't just be like, oh, Picasso's hands were weird too, you know? Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying.
I mean,
it's funny.
I feel that.
It's funny you say that since we're kind of in this realm of talking about the work and the process, and you mentioned live painting a little bit ago. I started this painting about a month ago at a live event. It was kind of like an, 6 to 8 hour day there. It was outside. It was really fun. And it was very like loose and like sort of just, I was being real loose with it. I wasn't trying to be illustrative or anything. And this couple came up and they were like, how much? And I was like, it's not done, like I'm just kind of messing around.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of this do I disclose without sounding weird? Anyway, I guess, they ended up offering me like a decent amount of money for it that I'm, in hindsight, the very next day I was like, I should have taken that. But now I've totally like transformed this painting, and it's like a lot of work, but it's going to be a different kind of cool thing than it was in just one day. And I think in the end I'll feel okay about it, but it's in that awkward middle teenage year stage of development where I'm sort of not hammering, but like figuring things out, putting in compositional elements and perspective and, mixing the colors. Oh, I wanted to ask you too, do you mix your acrylics? I know that you do mish technique primarily still, I'm imagining. Yeah. I've started mixing my colors lately, but like I think that's more of an oil thing.
What do you mean mixing them?
Well, like
while you're painting, like you have multiple colors out on your palette, and
like with a palette, like a traditional oil painter would, but I'm like spraying and like mixing and
when I paint an acrylic, like direct, say a portrait of somebody or something where I have like a pretty full palette of color that I'm drawing on, I like to use a stay wet palette. Same. That has like, it keeps the acrylic, and I use the fluid golden acrylics is my favorite. Yeah. And I don't use a retarder. I don't use, I try sometimes, I've tried it, but it just doesn't work for me because it doesn't make it actually really like oil. Ugh. Yeah. But I'll use sometimes a varnish in there too, like a satin varnish if I want it for a glaze. But when I'm painting directly with the acrylic, I'll definitely blend that way. But I very much like if I'm live painting, for an example, I'll work just with one color at a time. And that's a way to keep the harmonics of the piece really kind of like balanced, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, for sure. But I'll do it in acrylic too. It's just not as fun as an oil. Mm-hmm. I'll say that much. Yeah.
So is oil like your preferred medium then?
It depends on the scenario. Yeah. I mean, I very much like how quick acrylics will dry. Yeah. And it depends on the scenario. I just did a big live piece in Brooklyn, actually, and the whole 5 by 5 feet. Mm-hmm. I knew I had one night and the next day to kind of come in and kind of like fix it up. And it's a painting that's going to stay in this place. So it's pretty much a commission. Mm-hmm. It may end up, we'll see what actually happens with it, but it was very much inspired by this location, Gaia No Maya in Brooklyn that just opened. And I could have never done that piece in oil in that amount of time. And I also, knowing that it was going to stay there, like I wasn't going to be taking it with me, also put me in a different state of attention, if I, like in your scenario, where you started this piece, you spent 6 to 8 hours and you don't have like a necessary plan that it's going to be finished by that night and going to be auctioned off, or, you're not going to touch it again. You would treat it in a much different way. And I've done this many times with paintings where they don't have a specific goal, at their inception. Right. And so you can finish that session and be like, dude, this painting could be done for now. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think a goal would be that almost every session you go into, you see this painting could be done for now. Oh, I mean, not always, but it's something you never know when you're actually going to stop. Right. Or sometimes you do, but like if you can leave the painting in the state, it could be done for now, like after a significant session. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a nice goal to have, because another person is going to come and see what you've done and has no idea what else you would possibly do to it. Right. Like, unless you painted one hand and you didn't paint the other. Gotcha. And you saw the outline, then somebody would be like, "Oh, yeah, you didn't paint that hand," or something. Yeah. But otherwise, nobody knows. Yeah. So it's like, and if somebody comes and offers you a significant amount of money for a live painting, that's something really to consider. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I can see having considered it, you're like, well, and now it's going to become something even more, which is true. And that's amazing. Right. But as for all you live painters out there, consider that. And also if you want people to buy your piece, there at the thing, like prepare yourself for it.
Right.
and prepare others,
Right.
and be like, this is my goal. Even write it out in your little book or your, it's like,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. And this is how much.
Right. Yeah.
Know how much like a live piece in that time is going to cost.
Yeah. The thing was, it was like, it was pretty big. I think it's like 52 by 36 or something like that.
Nice.
And I started blank, and I think that was like the appeal for them. They just didn't really like, if the price had been higher, honestly, I probably would have been like, yeah, okay. But then I got home the next day and I was like, man, it would have been nice just to kind of like let that one go in a way. So, it's one of those like artist conundrum things that that you can butt up against as a live painter.
I have there's a live painting that I sold earlier this year that was the last one that I did at Burning Man with Gold Cap 2019.
Nice.
And it was the people that bought it, watched it come into being, and they were just like, and that was one of the pieces that, like, when I finished it, I was like, okay, I'm not going to touch it. And I was so close to like touching it again, because there's a lot of things about it that happened in 3 hours. And it was like a 36 by 48 canvas.
Yeah.
Started from like just a progression of color wash,
Yeah.
But I really wanted to keep painting on it, but they were like, no, leave it, please, because this is kind of the energy of that moment.
Yeah.
So there's something to preserving that. But one thing that is major with that is that, say you like made this transaction with those folks and they walked away with the painting, what about getting a really good photograph?
Yeah.
That's so important for the records, for all of us. And I also want to speak to not just good records of photographs, but good records of where your original work lives and your connection with the where your original work lives, with those people. And then also, contracts, certificates of authenticity, like taking your work really seriously.
Yeah.
Is something that I'm actually like, I'm deep enough. I should already be so solid in these things.
Right.
But I'm revisiting and upping my operations because of how important that really is, in the big picture, big long picture, to circle back to, the end when we all go back to that like center of time, and like we leave a legacy as artists.
Yeah.
We leave a trail,
Yeah.
What do you envision for that trail? It's like, where's it gonna, how does it live on? What permission are you giving it? What attention are you giving it?
Right. That's very important. I mean, I think we live in the age of like self-documentation now, although a lot of it, I feel like if I'm anything like everybody else, and I know that I am, I feel like that a lot of the self-documentation actually lives somewhere on the cloud, which may or may not be the safest place for it, and you brought up certificate of authenticity, which made me think immediately of NFTs, of course. Have you explored that at all?
Yeah. I still have not released one, but I have multiple projects that have, that were started even a while ago, but have not been released yet. It's like a kind of the overwhelming NFT knockout of like this past year. I dipped my toes in a couple times, but then, it was just not right scenarios yet for me. But
yeah.
I think all the strategy around it and there's so many options. Yeah. And that's kind of been overwhelming. I very much am interested, and I see the great value in this opportunity for artists and for really visionary projects to connect to people that are interested in helping fund them.
Right. Exactly.
That's really what I'm interested in NFTs for in many ways. It's like, yeah, it could sell an original painting and prints from it. But to really build something significant or to fund a project, you need significant funding.
Yeah.
And I think the NFTs is a world that can really, I hope, continue to flourish and help that transference of funds.
Yeah.
To support artists that have great visions and plans, building land-based projects, really nurturing, building institutions, schools of, new decentralized experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's a super exciting space. I got a little bit overwhelmed with it in the spring. I was on Clubhouse. That's where all that stuff was like kind of blowing up and being talked about, which I thought that was a pretty cool app.
It is. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the fact that you're hearing someone's voice, I think that that's super important. But, yeah, I kind of lost interest, I guess, or maybe some would think that I got distracted from that. 'Cause I mean, I do see it as kind of like the new wave, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I've kind of stepped back from all that. But now I'm like, I should, branch out into that. And I think it's a good investment of your time and energy, and just doing it right and treating it like you would any other piece of art, like taking the time to make something unique and cool and that speaks.
Totally.
Yeah. Speaks
something unique. I feel like there's also it scares me too, in a way, for this direction, and so much investment in the further investment kind of in the untangible.
Yeah.
In a way, like right. In the digital, there's like, in the whole meta, world that Facebook is turning into, and all the things that are ahead of us, like, and selling things, creating real estate and galleries and places in the metaverse, like this is the future in many ways, selling clothes for the avatars online.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to I don't have much of a window into it. I know that it's happening. And I think there's much good, in many ways through these developments of technology, but there's also a real, you playing more and more with the edge of also what makes us maybe unique and human, in certain ways. And I hope and I pray that this can be, the technology and this form and the blockchain and everything can help turn the ship, away from the big, overly powerful corporations and nations, in a sense, to more of a decentralized, holistic form. But I'm at the same time quite concerned, right? Is this a direction? The further we go down this path, are we is it a good thing? But I'm open, and I hope that, I know of quite a few good people in this sphere, that I feel like are, have a similar vision of the future in mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think some pros about it might be that if we, as a whole world, or as just a whole planet, a bit of de-emphasis on physical material things, except for paintings, of course. But you know what I mean? Maybe diamonds mined from Sierra Leone won't be as valuable as a Bored Ape or whatever, or a CryptoPunk, and this sort of de-emphasis on on physical goods might be a good thing. But I do see I just talked about this in my last podcast, but the whole like alone but online with everybody is kind of messed up. And I mean, I realize the irony of me saying that while we're on a Zoom call here, but there's something unique about being in the same room with a person or a group of people, that just something new comes out of that. There's some sort of like, pheromonal, whatever, unspoken, unconscious fields that we're all interacting with when two physical brains and bodies are next to each other. And I think that losing that completely would definitely be like a negative thing. But I haven't really gone over the whole pros and cons list of all the possible virtual reality things, but those are two that come to mind right now. But yeah,
I mean, I see that so much, but I also think that what we're going through right now is a reconfiguration, and the pandemic and the global situation has kind of like really fueled the this kind of isolation, and at the same time, like articulation, I think, of people slowing down enough to really focus also maybe on some of the things that they had been intending to or wanting to, and building community online is actually like a real opportunity to, because that there will be, I mean, I see other phases coming where there will be a new kind of migration in many ways, and so maybe through some of this opportunity of being able to connect online. This is what happened over the past, year and a half with the Vision Train.
Yeah.
There's been people that have made true, real connections that have been incredibly valuable to them in this time of isolation, in opening and empowering themselves through these relationships. And of course, they're not in the same room together, but there's still something that is being evoked through this ability to be alone together in a way, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I see an incredibly like hopeful, like perspective when it comes to this. But at the same time, it's like, there's a deep need for the physical embodiment, and sharing those eons, through the air, the good ones. But, it's going to come again, but this is an opportunity for us to connect to much more than we were able to connect to before.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely a plus for sure. Being able to connect to a random person halfway across the globe is for sure a good thing. I'd agree with that for 100%. So this is kind of in the same realm, but I kind of want to pivot to the business side of being an artist. Do you have any like best practices for navigating the business half or the business facet of making a living as an artist?
Well, I mean, I've never done anything else besides make a living as an artist.
Yeah.
And so it's been like it's been very project based. When I was younger, it was like, I'd come up with an idea and hope that it worked. I did batik, I did portraiture. I think a very important thing is to be somewhat not multidisciplinary, but to have like not put all your eggs in one basket. In terms of like expecting for like your heart's work, your core, to to sell when you need it to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should have some other, it's good to have other little jobs too.
Yeah.
You know, and also to make that, to make a graceful transition, if that's what you want to do, if you want to make money from your art, because I think that a lot of people romanticize it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think it can be very constricting also for many people, to have the pressure of making money through their art. It's just something that kind of like happened to me. It evolved simultaneously.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't really approach it from a real business development perspective because I didn't also have the training or experience. I just kind of kept making goals and meeting them, finding a way, you know,
mm-hmm.
and following through. And I was an assistant for quite a few years for an artist, right? But I didn't have any other kind of job besides my own, like, my own kind of crap shoots too, of kind of like what's going to work, you know, maybe this will work, maybe that'll work. But I think it's like really important to have, to be gentle and prepared, to not start and kind of jump into, oh, I'm going to be an artist too soon.
Yeah.
I see that way too often. Too many young people that kind of jump into that, where I think they could easily, they're not building enough of a foundation to really then be able to succeed over a long period of time, because you can burn yourself out so fast.
Yeah.
You know, and you a lot of your expectations or needs and desires, you know, you don't get the response that you would hope for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like there's so much so many ways that we can share our work now, right? Mm-hmm. You can immediately make a website, you got an Instagram, you got all this, you know, and you know, I think it's, yeah. So I don't know if that helps. I mean, I don't want to, you know, hats off to everybody that is like excited and inspired in that route. But I think, you know, I suggest too, not even like your first like 10 paintings, first 20 paintings.
Don't show anybody.
Like that's your, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and work towards like a show.
Yeah.
You know, depending where, if you're taking yourself seriously, you know, work towards building up at least 10 paintings.
Yeah.
That are finished before you go into trying to sell your work. Because, you know, you're also your first patrons are going to be your friends and family.
Yeah.
Right. And that's awesome. But that's a bit of a false, it's a bit of a false, like, I don't want to say recognition, but to really be then successful in the bigger scope, you know?
Yeah.
And they're also going to be more just supportive and to love everything.
Right.
Than to be critical, you know? And it's hard to get yourself into that. It's a sensitive thing to get yourself into that kind of like a scenario but when you start reaching out to galleries or doing stuff like that, I mean, you're going to get a response.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's good to get some critical response early. I've said this many times on the podcast, but I quit my job way too early, actually. And it was for a good cause. It was actually when I came out to Italy. I was like, hey, this is cool, right? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, peace. And I had some money saved up, but then I came back just a little bit, what would I say? Just oblivious, I think, to how things really worked. I'm like, all right, I'll just go to festivals and sell my work there. And I didn't realize how early I was and how not great my art was. I had that what's the is it Schadenfreude or Dunning-Kruger, where you just have like unstoppable confidence, but you're just like not that great. It's like, which is I think a very valuable thing to have in the beginning. But it's at the same time good to have some critical eyes looking at your stuff, right? And if you don't want your friends, after a while, your friends and family buying your artwork, you're just like, it'd be nice if a stranger came along and was like really moved or touched enough to throw down that amount of money for your stuff. And so yeah, basically I'm agreeing with you. Long story short here.
Well, this is good time. What year was it that you came to Italy?
2013. I had been painting for less than 2 full years at that point.
Oh my gosh, I so remember that. And I remember like, I mean, really, when we were preparing for this conversation, or just kind of watching what you've been doing with the podcast, and I've reflected a little bit, and looked at some of your work. I mean, I've seen it over the years, right? But you're one of the ones that didn't stop.
Yeah.
Like that was a big deal. That was a big opening for you when you came to Italy, and that kind of like, almost like that naive, zealous kind of like, was a real gift for you.
I think so. Yeah.
And I'm glad that you didn't stop, because your work has continued to really be refined, and you've earned more and more. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
You have to earn it.
Yeah.
You don't just get it handed to you.
Right. There's no shortcuts.
And I may have like kind of shown up. I showed up in like the kind of the US scene, visionary art scene, festival world. Like it was 2007, 8, 9 is when that started to happen for me. But I'd already had a decade before of painting every day.
Yeah.
Classical training and all kinds of other stuff, And so my work changed, but it's like being in the field and committed to your work, it takes time.
Yes.
And so this is where and you're basically starting a new business,
Oh yeah. Which by the way, I was just like, I'll paint, I'll sell my work. Who cares? And it's like so much more complicated than that,
Yeah. And that's where it's like, don't feel the pressure and like you have to turn your art into a business.
Yeah, that's important.
I think it's very important. I think it's really important to have multiple skills, especially to nowadays, and to see ourselves as artists in everything we do.
Yeah.
It's not just your painting that defines you, or your poetry, or your, it's your life. Like you are an artist. And that's one thing that you said before, seeing that everybody is an artist. Thank you, Bob Ross.
Yeah.
He's also one of those like great, like leaders in our modern world of like, really like supporting people and encouraging people to explore their artistry, that they're artists too. So like having other ways that you express yourself.
Yeah.
And that you can also make money can relieve that pressure from making the money directly from making paintings and prints and selling them.
Yeah.
And don't be too pleased with yourself.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
And be careful to not be too critical too, because then you won't do anything.
Yeah, it's it's a fine line for sure.
It's a fine line, but it's something like a healthy dose of both is what we need, and we need to like riding that wave of constant like critical, self-critical, like and also like encouragement and like accolades, like
yeah. It's funny because like I think social media is both both positively and negatively, gives you a distorted picture of what
Mm-hmm.
you're creating, like where it actually falls on how people think about it. Like, because we take one or two negative comments and just like fixate on those, and you may think about them all day, but then the opposite side of that is just your friends and family just gassing
Mm-hmm.
you up with all this love because they're like, oh my gosh, for me it was like, you're doing something. you know and so yeah, it's a funny thing to think about. But I wanted to dovetail this into your teaching career, because you also teach, and that's why I was in Italy. It was you and Maura Holden and Lawrence Caruana and Andrew Gonzalez, and and an awesome crew there that year. That's where I met my bud Martin Cash. Shouts to Martin
Hey,
and
Martin.
Simon. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, um, by the way, I remember, like, this is just something that made me smile thinking about it. Um, I was doing 3 paintings, and one of them was one of your portraits, and I had never really tried portraits. Like, I didn't know Loomis method. I didn't know what I was doing, and you would just kind of gently come around, and I think this is like, I haven't met a ton of teachers, but I think that you might be the best one that I've interacted with, because you have this way of
Mm-hmm.
like speaking to everybody individually. And like, you looked at my portrait and you were kind of like, the nose is a little too long. Do you see that? And then like, you would you would actually eviscerate it, but in such a nice way that it wasn't like it wasn't like too discouraging. So how do you do that?
Ah, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. Um, yeah, that is some kind of little gift that I have and that I enjoy,
hmm
the exchange with one-on-one, with someone. And the self-portrait has been such a great tool for that.
hmm
Um, and the ability, or the encouragement is like, you're doing great, and try this.
Yeah.
you know I mean, is like, I've never had to really maybe think about it too much.
hmm
It's kind of just been a natural flow for me.
Yeah.
But I've learned together with everybody that's ever come to study with me,
Right.
very vulnerably, I feel like. And I feel like when I go into the teaching role, every time that I do it, I have an overwhelming sense of fear, that I'm able, that I have anything to share with anybody,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then it's kind of like, based on kind of the formula that I've found works for me. And then, like, really looking at each person that comes and their struggle and their situation, and finding all you got to do is find one thing, and then you kind of like go down that path together, and having something to reference, like the self-portrait,
Yeah. Yeah.
to look at together, we can calibrate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's been like an incredible teaching tool. And I mean, these workshops, I started really teaching in Italy, I think it was maybe 2011,
hmm
maybe, or 2010. And that was, it was Lawrence that threw me into that
Yeah.
cauldron. And I'd already had some private students
hmm
in Vienna. I had a student that worked with me for like a year,
hmm
and but I had never done workshops. But I had the experience through going to some workshops with Phil Jacobson and Michael Fuchs. And you just go in and you jump in and say, like, okay, what are we going to do? And what's the medicine? What's the solution for you and for you and for you? To figure that out is like a detective game,
Yeah.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I haven't made too many people cry. I don't think, but because of their piece getting destroyed. But there's been moments. I mean, I've definitely cried.
Yeah.
Where it's an intense thing to get in the midst to help somebody push through and to discover their themselves with the self-portrait.
Yeah. I think that's a crazy cool skill to have, is to be able to teach. And like I said, you nailed it, in my experience. It's like, it's kind of like you put the criticism in the middle of the sandwich, and then on either end is like some nice things, some banter, but yeah. Were you teaching on the Vision Train, on that 24-hour global art jam you guys were doing?
Well, it's definitely it's an experimental station.
Mm-hmm.
It's an international creative space station where all kinds of things happen. Yes. Yeah. In the creative field. I mean, it was like a studio that we opened. Mm-hmm. I had this impulse, and I've been thinking about it for years, actually, knowing that the technology was out there, that we could get together online, and have an art jam. And because I have students all over the world, because I've taught all over the world as well. And knowing that was possible, I was kind of like, okay, when the pandemic hit, there was a very clear thing that started like pulsing through me, like, this has got to happen now.
Yeah.
And so I merged all my Facebook groups from different workshops for years. And so there was like 300 plus people in those groups. And I'm sure there was some that I missed because we didn't have Facebook groups, but we pulled that together. That was the invitation. Come guys, you've heard me talk about this many times. Let's get together and practice our work. Like, you've learned the skills, you just got to practice now, and we can support each other in this environment. So it is it's an environment of education.
Yeah.
So we would have Skillshare sessions. We'd have interviews. We had a schedule that was released like 24/7 for 8 months straight.
Yeah.
Alicia, Sacred Heart, she stepped up and she's like, I'll do the scheduling. We trained conductors from all over the world to like host, carry out a trip, like and they could plan different things during that time. And so it's still happening. It's still running. The train's happening. Go to visiontrain.org. And if you want to jump on board, it's a Zoom call. Right. And and sometimes there won't be anybody there right now. It's kind of renegade train at times.
Yeah.
But it's something we're going to start programming it again in a little bit of more. I mean, I'm going to start like a regular series on there again. I took a break because I had some big shows to finish work for. But in the workshops, did my first online workshop in 2020, summer 2020, as a response to my spring seminar in Italy that was fully booked being canceled.
Yeah.
And also the Vienna Academy of Visionary Art having to close in the spring of 2020. And so I was in a position to kind of take things online and didn't know what I was doing, but that's classic me. I'm like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And had an incredible group. I'm used to teaching in person 20 at once.
Yeah.
But in that first online workshop, we had 160 people join. And that was incredible. I never had the opportunity to do something like that. And then we did one more in the fall, like a year ago, Reflections. And we had, I think, 120 people for that. I mean, we're still learning, we've been facilitating workshops together with my crew, like Alicia and Yasmin, with Michael Fuchs. There's been a second seminar that's just coming to a close now with my teacher. So we've been able to enable him and kind of give back through helping him bring his teaching online. And, what's next? I mean, that's a big thing. I'm going to definitely do more online teaching, but I'm looking forward to in-person teaching again. But I'm also still like a little hesitant to plan things at the moment.
Yeah.
Because I need to close out some stuff and organize operations in my own world so that I can be a really effective teacher. You know, it's like teaching 10 years straight and just kind of going, like, I'd always go back to the same places in many ways because it was awesome teaching in eco villages all over the world, you know?
Yeah.
And, but it's been good now for me to take a pause and consider what's really next and what formats, and
Sweet.
it's going to be fun.
Yeah. I hopped on a couple of those vision trains. They were really fun, especially, I think I was mostly there in the spring, summer of 2020, the few times that I got on. And I found it really important that was happening. And there are other kind of things like it, like, you know, people would stream music and things like that. But, you know, if you were in those first, you know, that first month or so, everybody was like, we were totally clueless of how this thing was progressing in terms of, you know, spreading, I guess. And you just didn't see anyone, period. You know, you went to the grocery store, you get masked up, whatever. But, you know, I missed painting with my friends, which was something that, you know, you do if you have other painter friends that live near you. And that was a very nice, like, surrogate thing to have in place there. So yeah, I wanted to kind of, I know we touched on that in the very beginning, but for people who don't know what that is, Vision Train. Shouts to the Vision Train.
Yeah, we're just getting started. You know, it's like there's so much that it still hasn't come into form that we've envisioned in the past year and a half. And I really see the educational track really developing, you know, so in the sense, so there's the nonstop art jam, like that will always be there. Yeah. But there being more tracks for, you know, planned things that are paid and unpaid, you know, the paid and free, you know, in a sense.
Right. Yeah.
But that platform, like, I really see, I'm interested in contributing to the development of the, you know, visionary art culture worldwide, you know, and empowering artists and creators to really, you know, go deeper into their craft, create the best work they ever have, and support each other. Like, let's collaborate instead of compete, you know? And I mean, who else is going to do it? I mean, hopefully others, and we'll connect with them too, you know, but we got to put ourselves out there. Yeah. And I mean, anybody that wants to get involved is curious, like, please reach out. Like, I see another wave, you know, another swell is coming now out of this, you know, as we continue, right? And so it's like, how can we, I'm interested in networking. I'm interested in connecting the dots, building maps, resources. And, you know, we all have different skills, a bag of skills. Yep. Like, what are your skills? We need everybody, all hands on deck.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I've been saying this about podcasts too. Like, starting this podcast, I'm kind of the only one in our scene or our community who's doing like an art podcast. I mean, I guess Mr. Bill has his own thing, but he's like a musician. But I look at LA and the comedy world in LA, and all these comedians started podcasts, and they're always on each other's shows, just kind of, you know, it's like a cyclical promotional, you know, supportive kind of infrastructure there. But one thing that really inspires me is watching people collaborate, and even if it's just on a painting, that's great. But paintings and smaller collaborations like that can lead to larger things, and you know, maybe like community centers or something like that. Yeah. So, yeah, Amanda, this was really great talking to you. We're almost at 2 hours here.
I know my headphones just died. I'm sorry.
Oh, Perfect timing. That's good.
On that note,
Yeah.
community centers, and places of gathering, of connecting. This is what's ahead, and there's people that are investing into their local communities more than ever because of the pandemic too.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as we connect globally, we connect locally, and we, are preparing and creating places of gathering, of learning, of educate. I've been hearing more and more people talk about this, and I'm so interested to also come visit these places and also connect them into the train. These are the train stations. Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like they can be virtual, they can be physical, but as we build this network and it's already there. There's so many places that already exist and that are coming into being that, it would be great to know about each other.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in who's making the maps, merging the maps, connecting to the maps and building on them. That's, I think, a great resource for all of us.
Yeah. Super important.
To encourage the work and to remember, it's a multifaceted role that we play as artists now,
Yeah.
It's as much as the painting in many ways, if that's your medium, that's your flag, right? And that needs to be, it's articulate of your inner world, right? Of your voice and of what you want to share. And your life also needs to reflect that, and so the more we become transparent in a way of our process, it's going to help more people to also do that, and realize
100%.
that they're not alone,
Yeah. Well, so do you have any parting advice for younger artists as we wrap up here? I know you've dropped plenty already, but anything just to tie a nice little bow on it all?
Don't kill yourself.
It's good.
Literally,
Yeah.
it's a tough reality that we're in right now and world to look forward and to see, find your place. Know that there are others out there and that you're important and that your work is important and you're stepping up to the plate of your creativity and asking the questions, is helping others. Also exposing that, sharing that. It's like your voice matters. And we're in a realm and a time when we can do that. So I encourage you and I support you and I love you. And I hope that you, find good community and continue to also give of yourself, find out how you can be best of service and listen. Find times to be quiet and listen and have a good practice. Yeah. Do the work.
Yes.
Show up to your canvas.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. Those were beautiful parting words. And thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. You're amazing.
You are too.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/RTAF Podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running. I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Yeah.